What's your picture of God? What does God look like in your mind? But for that, we need to turn to Jesus, because as the Gospel of John says, if we've seen Jesus, we've seen God. In my home, growing up, there was a picture of Jesus that was hanging up over the couch. It was a picture of Jesus that was very popular in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. You still see it once in a while now. Painted by Warner Sallman. It's a kind of a Jesus, it's a brownish tint to it. He has shoulder length, wavy hair that's kind of blonde, light brown, a beard, light complexion. Y'all remember it? Yeah, it's kind of burned into our memories. Well, as I grew up, that's kind of how I pictured Jesus. Very European, very not realistic. Over the years, though, I've seen lots of different pictures of Jesus, and many of them created in the image of the artist, rather than being realistic. I've seen Jesus as Asian, Jesus as African, Latino, Native American, and I think the artist is trying to make a statement that Jesus is all things to all people. So what's your picture of Jesus? Even more, how do you envision God? Well, the Bible has lots of different pictures of God. In the Old Testament, we get this picture of God as a mighty warrior. Over and over and over again, as the people of Israel move into the promised land, they have to fight off enemies. And we're told how God would fight for them and God would give them the victory. And then you have the whole concept of holy war, where the people did nothing and God got the victory. You all remember the story of the Battle of Jericho? You know, people circle the city, they blow the trumpet, shout, and the walls come tumbling down, right? God did it all. Another image for God is a mighty eagle. In Jeremiah, there's this picture of God swooping down like an eagle against the enemies of God's people. And then in the Psalms, there's another image of God as an eagle, but this time God raising up and rescuing God's people on eagle's wings. In Hosea, God is pictured as this powerful, lurking leopard, ready to pounce and destroy God's sinful people. Then you have the Lion of Judah mowing down enemies with a roar. And the theme of most of the images of God is one of power and might. But have you ever thought of God as a chicken? The farmyard was a rather small place with all different kinds of animals, and there was a fence around the barnyard that kept them all in. And the farmer's main income came from the fields that he worked, but he liked to have these barnyard animals for not only the food they provided, but just for the variety they added to his daily life. Well, on the farm, some time ago, there lived a mother hen with her 5 chicks. And the chicks adored their mother. They followed her around wherever she went, and they learned from her to peck for food and for gravel so they could digest their food. And the mother hen was so proud of all of her little chicks. And they were going to grow up to be fine chickens someday. Now the chicks were not all the same, just like we're not all the same. You know, brothers and sisters from the same parents can be totally different. Well, some of the chicks would stay very close to their mother, kind of afraid of the world. Others would venture further away on their own. One of the chicks was particularly brave. She was the first to do everything. She was the first to practice flapping her wings. She was the first to peck at gravel, first to run, and it seemed like she knew everything about being a chicken before her mother could even teach her. Well, the hen was very comfortable with her brood in the farmyard, and she was used to all the various sounds and smells of the farm, so it didn't surprise her one day when the farmer started up his old gasoline-powered tractor. The mother hen kind of liked that sound and the smell, and it reminded her of the good old days before he bought that big, monstrous diesel tractor. But today, when he started up the old tractor, it sounded kind of a bit different. Maybe it's because it had been a long time since she'd heard it, but she went on pecking at the gravel and her little chicks in her sight. The chicks, though, were really surprised when they first heard that tractor and the new smell, and they were trying to figure it out. But just by chance, the mother hen noticed a little different smell, and not one that belonged. So she looked toward the tractor, and the farmer was standing several feet away from the tractor at a trailer. He was getting ready to hitch up to the tractor, and he was expecting the contents of the trailer, and he hadn't noticed the small fire that had started in the tractor's engine. Well, just as he stood up to turn toward the tractor to hitch up the trailer, that small fire exploded in a ball of flames, igniting all the grass around the tractor and throwing the farmer up against his wagon. The situation was pretty dangerous, and there was a brisk breeze blowing, and it blew the flames, fortunately, away from the farmer because he was kind of a little bit unconscious at that point, but it blew the flames toward the barnyard. And the flames steadily approached. The mother hen began to feel afraid. And her little chicks now were scattered all over the barnyard, but she gathered them all together and told them to sit tight beneath her. Well, as the fire came closer, the chicks realized the danger, and they started to scatter all around the barnyard, but the fence wouldn't allow them to escape. But again, the mother hen insisted, and she gathered her chicks together until finally they were all gathered in. But as the smoke grew thicker and the flames grew closer, one chick was certain that she was going to die if she stayed where they were. So she broke loose and ran to the farthest part of the barnyard, certain that she'd be the only one that was going to survive by getting as far away from the fire as she could. Well, the fire was raging by the time the farmer came to. But fortunately, a neighbor had seen the flames, called the fire department, and when they arrived, the farmer was able to tell them where the water source was. When the fire was completely out, the farmer assessed the damage. The barnyard had been completely burned by the fire, and only a shell remained of the barn. Nothing moved in a yard that had been so full of life. But then the farmer noticed this strange black lump at the far end of the barnyard, and he went over to see what it was. When he got there, he realized that it was his mother hen. And underneath were four very frightened but alive little chicks. What the farmer didn't notice, though, was a small burned lump a few feet away, and he wondered what had happened to that fifth little chick that was the leader, the brave one, the independent one, the one who refused to be gathered. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. What an incredible image of God. Not this powerful warrior or lion or eagle or leopard, but God as a humble chicken, a mother hen, God as vulnerable and protective, God trying to gather us and to protect us and lamenting over those who refuse to be gathered. God in Jesus giving up God's very life for us. I think that the gospel writer Luke is trying to tell us that neither Herod's plotting nor Jerusalem's resistance to God's maternal love is going to deter Jesus from his sacrificial mission or his God-given purpose. God will love us, protect us, gather us, save us, and heal us no matter what. This week, as we continue studying the Psalms on Wednesdays, as I mentioned in the announcements, we're going to be looking at lament psalms. Psalms of disorientation that come at times in our life when life is falling apart. Our words to God in the midst of that. Well, Jesus' words here are also a lament. But they're not us lamenting to God. They're God lamenting when we refuse to be loved and gathered and sheltered under her wings. And after the events of this past Friday morning with the shootings and the deaths at the mosques in New Zealand, even more I can picture God lamenting over her rebellious people who will not be gathered and who choose to live in violence and hatred rather than being gathered together into God's loving and peaceful embrace for all of God's varied people. As I was preparing for the sermon this week, I read that there is a chapel on the Mount of Olives across from Jerusalem. It's a church of, and I think I'm pronouncing this right, Dominus Flevit. And according to tradition, it's the place where Jesus wept over Jerusalem because Jerusalem refused to be gathered. Inside the chapel, there is an altar centered in the front arched window that looks out over the city. And on the front of the altar, there is a large mosaic medallion of a white hen with a golden halo around her head. And her red comb resembles a crown, and her wings are spread wide to shelter all the pale little yellow chicks who are gathered around her. What an incredible picture of God. The mother hen who gathers us together to protect us and save us. The mother hen who stands between her chicks and the world who would do them harm. She doesn't have any fangs. She doesn't have any claws. She doesn't have any rippling muscles. All she has is a willingness to shield her babies with her own body. That's the God we worship.